Hello and welcome to Ginger Prime. My name is Brian, and in today's video we're diving into my UI, HUD settings, and so much more in the world of Final Fantasy XIV. I've been getting a lot of comments on my 14 guides and videos about how do I manage my settings, my UI, and so much more. And I thought this would be a really great time to kind of do a deep dive into the system, show you all that it's capable of, hopefully help answer any questions that you have. But if for some reason I do miss a question or you still have questions after this, be sure to ask them below and I can see if I can't do a follow-up video if I miss anything in this guide. Now, that all being said, check the top link in the description to be able to find the playlist for all my 14 content. That way you can easily get to any updated content, especially as expansions launch, if you're finding this guide down the road at some point in the future. Thanks for being here. And if you are already a subscriber to the channel, welcome back, Soul Nation. You are truly magnificent, and I really appreciate you checking out this video. That's what subscribers get: compliments and other free random perks for just hitting that subscribe button. You can always unsubscribe later if you don't end up liking the content here on the channel. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. This should hopefully be a lot of fun, and I cannot wait to get your feedback on really on this video. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, first and foremost, I'm a controller player, hands down. However, you could be keyboard and mouse. There's a lot of ways that you can play and approach Final Fantasy XIV, both on PlayStation and on PC, and presumably other systems in the near future. Hopefully we'll see Xbox players join the fray at some point. Now, that being said, I'm going to be approaching a lot of this kind of with the context of a controller player mindset, but note that I do actually have access to a keyboard and mouse because I do play on PC, so that way I can kind of highlight a few things for you. Now, the first thing I want to highlight, because this is very annoying, the game doesn't necessarily give you a lot of detail into this, but let's say you wanted to increase your dialog box size. There's a couple ways you can do this. Right now, with a keyboard and mouse, it's very easy. You can actually right-click, say scale window, and let's say if I want to really get, obviously a lot of pop on the text itself, I can do that. Now, for controller players, there's not an easy way to do it. There's no button that I can press that's going to help access this menu. So what you have to do is you have to go into what's called virtual mouse mode. This tip right here is going to play out well throughout the rest of this video. So you should really get familiar with this option, especially if you don't have a mouse hooked up to your device. So to enter virtual mouse mode, hold down the left bumper and then right click, or excuse me, the R3 button. If you press that as a click, you'll see now here it says you have entered in virtual mouse mode. And as I'm moving this around, I'm actually using my right stick to move the mouse mode. Now what you have access to is now left trigger and right trigger act as a left click and right click. So if I actually use right trigger, I can now say scale window. It's not as enjoyable as you would say as a direct mouse, but at least it gets the job done. So then I can set it to like 160%. So that's how you enter into that aspect. So left trigger becomes a left click, right trigger becomes a right click, and then your right stick actually becomes your mouse cursor in this regards. So to exit virtual mouse mode, hold down the left R or the L1 button, excuse me, and then press the R3 button. And now you'll see that the camera returns to the right stick control. So that's just something, I think it's important for everybody to know. You cannot, for some reason, I cannot seem to access this in cutscenes. So talk to an NPC, set your size correctly, and then enjoy the product, enjoy the cutscenes, being able to read them, especially if you're on the new PC version or the PS5 version of the game. As if you go into your system configuration and you can go in your display settings, you can now actually render the game into 4K. If I go ahead and just hit apply on this, you're going to see my UI gets blown out of proportion. A lot of different things improve its size and its scale. Now this video is actually being recorded in 1080p, so this could feel like this is a little bit overwhelming, but I'm going to go ahead and set it back to full HD in this case, and then you can see here, oh no, everything's blown out of proportion. What do I do? How do I fix this? Brian, please help. Okay, easy to start. Let's go into your HUD layout, and you can see here I've got a couple different HUD options, and you can just kind of press on and you actually have up to 4 different layouts. You can use macros for this to be able to switch your layouts. Let's say if you wanted a specific layout for your white mage versus your scholar, or your healers versus your tanks or your DPS. We'll get more into that in a future video, going into kind of the UI and into the macro system that Final Fantasy XIV has to offer. So just keep it locked here to the channel for more detailed guides on that regards. But all right, we're going to stick with HUD 2. That's what I've been working for. And if I actually press the R3 button on any object that is selected, you can see here it's growing and shrinking accordingly. That's how you can easily resize that. But the other thing you have access to is this wonderful little settings button in which you can come in here and easily set the size as necessary. Now let's go ahead and actually pick on a HUD object. Yeah, let's go ahead and discard our changes there. So let's go ahead and pick on our cross hotbar. That's the first thing I think I need to go ahead and just resize. And instead of cycling through, so just to highlight this real quick, if I just keep pressing, it's going to eventually cycle through. So I can just keep pressing down on the R3. I believe it's the home key. Nope, it's not the home key. It's one of the keys on your keyboard. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Go ahead and press the setting here, and you can actually adjust it to a various different like kind of setting there. So here, if I just put it at 80%, I can also turn off the element completely if I desire. I can hit save, and now I can go ahead and reposition some of these items here. So if I just go ahead and keep resizing, I can find the perfect setting, the perfect layout for myself here accordingly. Now, let's go ahead and just resize a few of these objects because I think hopefully you've gotten the idea here in and of itself. But what I want to focus in on is a lot of people ask about, like, how do I get these weirdly shaped hotbars on my screen? Well, first and foremost, going back into the HUD layout and settings option here and going into the different options, let's get actions out of that way. So hotbar 7, if I click on the settings for a hotbar, you'll see also, you know, we've talked about the size, but I didn't talk about the different grids here. You can actually resize yourself into multiple different kind of grids. If you want a horizontal grid, if you want a vertical grid, or yeah, horizontal then vertical, I had it a little backwards. You want a 3x3 stacking that way, you can actually hit save. You can also then have your hotbar and those options managed that way accordingly. So one of the things I do want to highlight real quick, because obviously that was throwing my visual sense way off as I was trying to do that guide, just doing a lot of resizing. I didn't think that was ultimately probably for the best. So you can actually come in here and go into your UI size and actually set every element all at once to an increased or decreased resolution size. So rather than sitting here have to do it one element at a time, especially in my case because I destroyed my UI for this guide, I can now kind of manage it accordingly. So now you see a little bit cleaner of a UI. And yes, I'll still have some things that I need to resize, but not really to worry about too much of that. I actually had to find that out because I was like, this is going to take a little bit of time. Let's go ahead and see if we can do it faster. And that's going to, again, under system character configuration, display settings, and then default size to use all. So hopefully that is a great tip for you as well. So furthermore, let's go ahead and get back into talking about essentially, like, let's go over the HUD settings and kind of our cross hotbar 3 here. This is what usually gets a lot of questions about how I actually set skills here. So let's say I want to drag camouflage onto here. I cannot. You cannot set anything as a part of your ffxiv, is what it's called, the cross hotbar. What you have to do is you have to see where these are actually linked. Now in this case, I have them linked to set 3. So let's say I want to go ahead and put camouflage on this bar. I can easily drag and drop it and set it right there, so I don't have to worry about it anymore at that point. It's set and done. If I move anything in hotbar 3 which is linked, that's going to be where that is currently managed. So hopefully that is a good tip for you guys as we dive in. Now, if you're not used to using the controller here in Final Fantasy XIV, and you see here I'm kind of zoomed in on my character, you can actually hold down the L1 button and then use the right stick to move in and out. So you can see here I'm zooming up and down, and you actually have quite a bit of zoom that you have available to you in the game of Final Fantasy XIV. You can see here I'm widely zoomed out in this case. So just note that you have a lot of control about this. Now you can actually have a setting here that will allow you to zoom all the way into first person mode if you so desire. Now pressing down on the R3 with nothing else pressed, it will take you into first person mode, in which the game will function as you probably would expect a first person game to function. Now the game is still written for or designed for third person, so you might not be able to see yourself standing in bad. So I'll leave it up to you if you decide to run that kind of style gameplay. So, all right, we've covered how to adjust your chat settings. We've covered a little bit of hotbar settings, layout in the hotbars. Let's actually dive into specific configuration, because what you can see here with my hotbars, you see that I've got a lot of hotbars up and running around, but you don't see any extra spots, and that's actually all due to various settings in the game. I have hide unassigned slots turned on. If I actually turn that off and go ahead and close this, now you see a lot of little floating boxes out there in the world. This might be distracting to you, this might be annoying to you. So again, I recommend going into character configuration and then going into hide unassigned slots. That way you can actually get these different floating hotbars out here that are going to feed you information that you need to know. Like here I'm working on various relic steps. Well, you know, instead of constantly checking how many items I have, I can just drag and drop those items onto these hotbars and I can let them count up for me. So I'm not having to sit here to worry about and manage that information myself. That's a really, I think, thing that you should absolutely take advantage of. So spending a little bit more time with your UI right now, I want to kind of point out kind of your inventory grid here. This might not seem like a necessary tool that you're utilizing, but I would encourage you to pay attention to it. You see here on the left-hand side, I'm hovering over this, that I've got a lot of little white boxes. If I click on that, it's actually going to bring up my character profile and my inventory. What the white represents is that I've spear bonded with the piece of gear. So what I can do right now is I can go ahead and say extract materia, and I can say yes. And what it's going to do is it's going to feed me with another piece of materia that I can use. So I can just keep doing this. So this is going to tell me, as you see that the item turns to green now, this will actually help me like continue to have and make materia in the game itself. So if you're ever like stressed out, you're like, man, it costs so much to do so, don't forget about the spirit bonding system, and don't forget about this UI element that's going to tell you that you can go ahead and grab some pieces out of that to feed your inventory, either to sell on the market or the game, or just generally use over the course of, for whatever reason you decide to increase your stats off that piece of gear. So hopefully that's a really good UI tip for you guys as well. So I'm just going to do the left side. I'll save the right hand side for an upcoming guide talking about how to make money in this game without even bothering crafting whatsoever. Okay. Let's dive back into character configuration. Here also, when we talked about the HUD, when we talked about how you can lay out and set all the different options and kind of resize them, obviously going into the different settings, when I share the hotbars, you can also do that from this tool here, hotbar settings. You can choose what is all selected. So I use hotbar 3 right here, which you can see here is horizontal, but I can shift it up if I desire. And you can play around with how you want it to look just from this bar alone. Now I have display recast timers turned on. So this is going to tell me as things kind of get used, you can see that it's now counting down on that skill specifically. I already talked about hide unassigned slots. I say display hotbar numbers turned off, because if I turn them on, now you'll see a lot of floating hotbar numbers. So generally I have that turned off. You can decide whatever you want. I have enable hotbar cycling button turned on, include pet hotbar when cycling, enable drag and drop repositioning as well. Now, if you did not want to enable drag and drop repositioning, you can do so. If I actually turn on hotbar 1, you can see it listed up here as well, and I can kind of cycle through the different options here. So again, some of this stuff might not necessarily make as much sense to you, but again, I turn off hotbar 1 because I don't necessarily use it, and using that up and down arrow allows me to cycle through the different options, so to speak. All right, continue on. Hello. I'll just wave. All right, that was fun. Okay, so I love this game. All right, let's see here. We talked hotbars, we talked settings. Just kind of scrolling down here. Pet hotbar, when your pet hotbar is available, display both the pet hotbar and cross hotbar. You can also have different options, display only one or the other. Pet hotbar auto display settings. You can say to only display it once, display when pet hotbar and hotbar are one. Lots of things I would honestly just encourage you to play with. The other thing what comes down to it is sharing. Let's say I was tracking this. This is one of those hotbars that's out there. Let me go and turn on hotbar numbers so I know that's 7. So if I go into sharing, and I can see here that hotbar 7 is not shared. Now I should go ahead and turn it on to say that hotbar 7 is shared, so that no matter what job I'm on, I'm going to always see those options. Now, since I hit save and apply, it's automatically going to override with whatever was there ultimately. So again, I have to drag and drop these right off my bar to kind of clean that up. And you can see here that the last time I touched this, I was on Black Mage and I was building out a rotation guide for myself. So again, when we talk about it and you see in my other videos, I will put my rotations in these floating hotbars so that that way I can always remind myself and feed myself the information so the UI is working for me. Now, I cover the cross hotbar a lot on my different controller guides, so I would encourage you to go check the playlist and go dive into a job specific setting, because that's where some of these things might differ. But again, I use hold, I use all these W cross hotbars and so much more. So just take a look at that. We don't need to get into that as much because I want to focus in on the expanded cross hotbar and the W cross hotbar here. Currently set to enable directional and active action buttons. If I turn that off, you'll only see 4 slots. This will give you all 8 on both the W cross hotbars. And enable expanded controls, that's LT and RT and RT and LT. Now, one of the things I've kind of glossed over here is Cross Hotbar 7. Here you'll see I've got Sprint, I've got my Wanderer's Tales, which I haven't refreshed, I've got Mount Roulette, I've got a specific mount, my 4-person seater, my Limit Break, and I got a couple of macros here for targeting. So if I go ahead and select different things, you can see here, if I go ahead and just play around with it, is it going to target any enemies? No, it's not going. I don't necessarily use them as much anymore, namely because within the game itself, it's kind of become really simplified to tank. So targeting macros really haven't been as important as they were in the past, but just kind of show you my user macros page, you can see here I've got a lot going on. The number 6 in this case represents a countdown, that's /countdown, and in this case you can put any number beside it. I also focus target on a player character, or sorry, it could be a player character, but I focus target the boss in this case, so that way I'm going to get that countdown, which everybody can kind of sync up, so you can kind of plan your burst phases if necessary. Then I also have, in this case, if you look at set 2 targets, I focus target and then I do kind of a loop through targeting backwards and forwards on enemy and marking them accordingly. So that way, if we ever need to do a kill order, I can actually do that very easily just with my macros themselves. All right. Going back into character configuration, like hopefully you guys are enjoying this guide. If you are, please hit that like button. I hope you enjoy it. We last but not least on this section we have the enable customized hotbar when weapon is sheathed and drawn. I have it with this where it's sheathed so that when my weapon is out, I will cycle with R bumper through the different hotbars that I have enabled. So 1, 7, and 8. So you can see that here. Now when my weapon is drawn, which I can press by the L3 button, then no matter what, if I press R bumper, I'm not going to accidentally get off the page for these skills themselves. So hopefully that is a good tip in and of itself. Under your control settings, you got a lot to work with in the game itself. I have automatically skipping cutscenes that have already been viewed. This is a handy feature, especially if you're running a dungeon or doing anything else. This will auto skip cutscenes that you have already seen, but it won't auto skip cutscenes that you have not seen. You can always turn this off, and you can run it vary by scenario, by transportation cutscenes, and housing cutscenes. In my case, I just kind of turn them all off in this case. You can always reverse and inverse your cameras based off your perception of the game, third person and first person. And then you can also switch to first person when fully zoomed in. We kind of covered this earlier, but if I zoom in all the way now, we can actually click off the window. I will actually go right into first person if I zoom all the way in, and then I can go all the way out. And so if you like that feature, you can turn that on. If you don't like that feature, you can turn that off. And personally for me, I prefer not to do that in this case. In other videos we've gone through, I've talked a lot about how you can do different things with your targets. Just note that when it comes to target display settings, I can highlight potential targets. If I go and hit apply on this, you can see anything that as I kind of hover over, it's going to give them a yellow glow with that option on. So if you are like, I don't know, struggling visually with the game, trying to figure out what is selectable and what is not, I would recommend maybe turning that on, and you can get a couple of different things. You could say display target rings, display target lines, and display aggro lines. Heavily influenced from Final Fantasy XII, but as you're attacking things, if something's going to attack you, you can have those to kind of tell you, hey, this is going to point in your direction, and go from there. Under filters, you have the ability to filter your targets. This is for PC and or gamepad. You have those controls there. So just note that if your weapon is out, you can have a whole different targeting priority versus if your weapon is sheathed, you can have your different options and settings to drive yourself forward from there. And then if you want to be able to display headgear or turn it off, as a Hrothgar, I really don't have too many things going on my display. But one of the things I do want to kind of point you to in this case is the battle effects settings. So you can have all your own. You can also then for your party, and then for others, you can actually say show limited skills or more. Now, as a tank, when I'm doing big pulls, it actually helps to not have so many things going off in my face at that time. So I actually set it to none in this case, so I'm only seeing my abilities, but really you can kind of play around with that. You can have your party and you to show all, and then others, make sure that's turned off so that you don't have it overwhelming your visual sense of self, in this regards to kind of dive into it. So just note you have a lot of flexibility here as well. Now I'm going to jump into some display name settings. One of the things I really enjoy is being able to kind of say, hey, what kind of tags do you want? I can say own display name settings always, only during battle, when I'm targeted, and then never. So if I want to just never see my name, no matter what I'm doing, then I can choose to do that here. So I can say always, and then you can choose whether you want to show your full name, any kind of abbreviation name, when your HP bar is low or whatnot, so you can see that if necessary. You can also talk about your companions and your pets, but also when it comes down to alliance members, party members, even your friends, you can actually say, hey, I want to see their tag, and they're going to show up as a different color altogether, and you can actually select what color the different your different party members show up with their name tag and more. So like if any of my friends were actually running around right now, you would see this orange color running around with the nameplate bar, and that would tell you they're on my friends list. It's one of the really most exciting things where you can see when you're running around in the game itself. So you can see here I have name tags turned off unless I currently set and actually click and target somebody in this case. So hopefully that is a really cool feature for you to dive into. Same thing can be applied to your NPCs and also into like PvP front lines and more. All right, let's talk about our logs. So yes, I've got a couple different battle logs. Did you ever know you could just kind of click and drag that log out and have another log completely on the screen feeding you information? Same thing could be applied to like your free company and friend chat and things like that. So you could have a whole chat dedicated to just your friends, and then you can have a general shout chat or more. So note that you have that ability. You can do, you can keep doing this as well. So you can see here, now I've got a bunch of different logs all floating out in space as necessary. You can also within your logs change and turn things on and off, make it look like it's abbreviated, play around with how it's structured, and you could even go into your filters to be able to set like what you can see, whether it's in general, battle, or announcements. So you hear just my general, I turned off all battle effects because I just want to see kind of chat and other messages. And then I have a battle tab that's only focusing in on what's going on in terms of the battle log itself. And I can just drag that drop and put that back in place right here as necessary. So you just kind of drag that back in and it adds it back into it as well. So just note you have some flexibility. If you want to create your own log, you could also do so, but you can only have 4 tabs. You can also easily access the settings from this tool. We've covered some UI stuff. We've covered, just a whole bunch of little tips and tricks for the game. But lastly, I want to go back into my HUD layout. In your HUD layout, you'll notice I have this little gauge here for my job. All jobs have kind of their job gauge. They might have 1 or 2. Now, that might be something you like the look of. You can also switch to simplified mode, and you can see here the gauge changes, and in this case actually is kind of small. So I can go ahead and increase its overall size, and there you can see I can actually use what's called the simplified gauge for my job itself, or you can go back in, turn that off, and then you can use the more advanced or more visually appealing gauge for that to be a case. So be sure to dive into all the different settings and more that you have access to. I said last thing, but here we go, one more last thing. Because one of the things in settings, it turns out with your buffs and your debuffs, you can actually say, I want to split them into 3 groups. You can say display as one single element, or you can actually have them split into your different groups of your bonuses, your buffs, your debuffs, and then up here I have my food buffs, things that are a little bit more permanent that aren't necessarily as important to maybe doing a raid or a battle or something like that. So just note you have a lot of flexibility when it comes to your UI and your settings, and hopefully this has been a help. Guys, there's been a lot that I covered in here. This is just me sitting down, hopefully kind of going through the system and the settings and what you can kind of play around with. And hopefully it's giving you some ideas of how you want to build out your HUD, your layout, and your guide. I don't think obviously I touched on absolutely everything that this game can do. And at that point, if you guys have any questions or you're struggling to kind of mirror something that I've got going on in my game, or you see something else in somebody else's from some gameplay, let me know. I'm here to help. Hopefully we can help get these questions answered for you. But with that, I'm going to wrap up. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Hopefully you have a great and wonderful day. This has been Brian for Ginger Prime. And if you enjoyed this video, no pressure to do so, but if you check out the join button on this channel in terms of membership, if you look at it, I have it starting at just $1. It's going to give you emotes. It's going to give you obviously other little perks, and there's really something special. I'm looking at actually creating what's called the Founders Club, essentially just kind of the first, I haven't decided on the number, but whoever essentially joins, I want to have at the end of these videos kind of a list of the founders of the channel, those who hit that membership. And at some point we'll have to cut that off, obviously, but that's what I'm considering. And I'd love it if you considered maybe hitting that join button at the dollar amount. That's a $1 a month, and that's really what I would want. I'd rather have a lot more people hitting that dollar amount than anybody doing kind of the other tiers, but I'm gonna leave it up to you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for, if you've subscribed, welcome to the channel. If you hit that like button, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing out this video that way. If you have any questions, comments, or anything that you want to add, please sound off in the comments below. But for Ginger Prime, my name is Brian. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you have a great day, and I hope to see you in my next video. But until then, take care. This video is sponsored by me, Ginger Prime. Hopefully you'll check out my podcast channel, Ginger Gaming Radio, which we have lots of guests, lots of great conversations, and even more highlights. Links are in the description below. Let me know what you think. Thanks.